Hey, what's up, everybody? Nitreg here from nitreg.com, and today is day 4 of the 31-day poker challenge. And the subject today is how to table select like a boss. Basically, this is all, I don't know if it's new information. This is just non-conventional information. The way I table select is very different from what people usually say. So I want to go ahead and share that with you guys and tell you my opinions. And you can feel free to disagree if you want. But I don't know. I encourage you to hear me out, and I think I have some valid points. So, for those that don't know, what is table selection? Why do we do it? Table selection is basically just choosing a poker table. Instead of just arbitrarily choosing some random poker table, you actually seek out one that you think is going to be the most profitable. Obviously, it has to be the most profitable because that's why we're playing poker, to make money. So yeah, you want to go ahead and find the most profitable table, and that's table selection. So, generally, the conventional wisdom is to look at little factors. So, for instance, let me open up my lobby here for lock poker, and you can see up here there's things such as the stakes, the limit, how many players are seated, waiting. But generally, people are looking at like players per flop, average pot. They might be looking at VPIP, hands per hour, all sorts of different little stats, and they'll have different little theories of tables that you should play at based upon what the numbers are. So, for instance, someone might say you should only play 4 ring tables that have above 20% VPIP, and that'll be the type of conventional wisdom that you'd hear. And I think that that's kind of the wrong way to look at it. The way I look at it is you want to look at the individuals sitting at the tables, and it basically you want to figure out the best way to exploit them and the maximum amount of money that you can make. So you have to look at things on a more micro scale rather than a macro aggregate scale. So kind of an example that I'll give is that VPIP example that I was telling you about. The conventional wisdom is the higher the VPIP is, obviously the more profitable it is. You'll have more guys that are like limping and calling and playing more a wide selection of hands in general. So that sounds logical, and it really is. In a lot of cases, it's actually true. But it's not necessarily the best and most optimal case. So, for example, what if I told you that there's a table? This is in my blog, by the way. Over at nitreg.com. I'll put the link in the description. But what if there's a table with 24% VPIP, which sounds pretty high, right, for a 4 ring table? And then there was one seat open there, and then another seat that was open, and it was at a table that has been playing for a while, and it has 0% VPIP. This is just theoretical, by the way. Obviously, people play poker, so they can actually play poker. So having 0% VPIP is almost impossible, unless someone was trying to do it. So the question is, which table would you select, the 24 VPIP or the 0% VPIP? Well, conventional wisdom would say, hey, the higher it is, the better it is. So let's go with the 24% VPIP. You'd be battling it out, trying to value own fish all day. Just typical stuff. But I think I would rather choose the 0% VPIP. And I kind of did the math. At a 4 ring table, you'll get 7 opportunities to steal 1.5 big blinds, the small blind and the big blind. And then you'll get 1 opportunity to steal 1 big blind. That's where you're in the small blind, you just raise and win the big blind. And you get 1 opportunity to win the 0.5 big blinds, and that's when you're in the big blind and the small blind folds. So this means you earn 12.5 big blinds per orbit. So every 9 hands, you get 12.5 big blinds per hand. Or I'm sorry, per orbit. Let's say hypothetically you play 90 hands an hour at an online table, which is pretty reasonable considering everyone's just sitting there folding. This comes out to you making 125 big blinds an hour, or having a whopping win rate of 138.9 big blinds per 100. So this literally means every hour you're making 1.25 big blinds, or I'm sorry, 1.25 buy-ins. And that's absolutely ridiculous. I think that will be pretty hard to do at a 24% VPIP table, unless you just have massive fish at those tables, which doesn't really sound like it. So that's one of those cases where, the standard theories just don't really hold up. And of course, 0% VPIP tables don't exist in real life, but that's just an example to show you how these theories aren't 100% true, and there's more to look at than just aggregate numbers. Um, so with that being said, what makes a table profitable? Like, why would I want to sit at one table over another table? Nice, I got top two pair. Let me go ahead and evaluate this guy real quick. Not really paying too much attention to bet sizing and how I'm playing on these tables. I just have this table running just to give you guys something interesting to look at while I'm playing. I'm just gonna fold here. But yeah, anyway, what makes a table profitable? Like, what do I look for? Well, I look at everyone at the table, and I kind of think about how I can exploit people the most. And the best way I can do that is by color coding literally everyone that I play with. So I'll label this guy as a reg that might have some exploitable tendencies. He's 18/10. There's a giant gap between those two numbers, so he's probably calling a lot pre-flop and trying to speculate and see a lot of flops. He doesn't really fold so much to C bets. He really does not fold to 3 bets at all. Kind of exploitable reg. There's a guy over here who's 31/4, so this guy's a big loose passive guy. There's a guy over here who's 11/10, so this guy's basically a giant nit. There's people all over. You just got to start marking them. It doesn't take that long. Like, you're just sitting here in between hands, you just start marking people. I marked like 3 right there, and you just keep going around. Obviously, I can't mark a couple of these guys. I don't really have that many hands against them, but there's little clues you can have. So, for instance, this guy has $9.15. Usually, regs don't buy for $9.15. So I don't know. I'm gonna assume this guy's a fish. I won't mark him just yet, but I'm gonna assume he's a fish unless he tells me otherwise. Just because that's very unorthodox for a reg to buy in for that amount, or any sort of serious player. So yeah, basically you just want to just constantly do that. And it sounds like it'll take forever to mark everyone, but it really doesn't. You can probably mark 70 or 80% of the poker players at your limit that you're going to play with. You can probably do that within like 3 or 4 decent sized sessions, I should say, sorry. It doesn't take that long because you just play a lot. You just play a lot of hands against the same type of or same exact opponents all the time. The players that you don't see often, like if someone's new to your tables, you don't know who they are, they're probably going to be a recreational player. There's some exceptions, like there's players that move up in limits, move down in limits. So, of course, there could be regs and nits and lags and all sorts of stuff like that. But generally, especially if they have like odd stack sizes and stuff, you can probably assume that they're going to be a fishier player. And you might want to wait a little bit until you just make that assumption and label them, but it would be safe to say. So yeah, you want to go ahead and start marking that. Now, I'm not going to start to tell you how to exploit these players, but in general, you kind of want like nittier players on the left. Nits are on the left, so we can steal their blinds constantly. That kind of goes back to that whole, zero VPIP table, that theoretical zero VPIP table. Basically, we're just going to relentlessly steal their blinds. Like, of course, we're not going to win 12.5 big blinds every single orbit, but let's say we could win an extra 2 big blinds per orbit. That's going to be a huge boost to our win rate. We're going to also want loose passive players to our right. So guys to our right, like maybe this guy looks a little bit loose passive. This guy's to my right, Radon 222. He seems loose aggressive, but he's definitely loose. This guy to my right, Lich 473. He's 31/4, so he's loose passive. You want these guys to your right because these guys are going to be putting in a lot of money with really junky hands, and you can just play them in position very well. So you definitely want them to your right and nits to your left. Now, when it comes to laggy players or tags that play back at you, you really don't want them to your left. That's the worst thing ever. Most regs at the micro stakes aren't going to be playing back at you too much. So, for instance, there's a reg to my left. But if you look, he folds to steals 88% of the time. He three bets only 2.8% of the time. This guy's basically just like waiting for hands and not really playing back at people. He's just kind of chilling there waiting for hands and not really doing too much. So he's not a huge threat to me. Um, if there's a guy to my left who's like three betting me every single hand and calling me and floating me constantly and just give me a really tough time, I'm gonna really want to avoid that because that really really sucks. So for instance, I might isolate this guy up here that limps, and then he knows that I'm isolating wide. He'll go ahead and start three betting me a lot, and not only does it make it unprofitable against this guy, but it makes it unprofitable to exploit the fish to my right, and I lose out on all those steal opportunities to my left. So it's really negative EV to have those people directly to your left. So ideally, if you sit at a table and there's regs, you either want them directly to your right or across the table from you, and you really don't want them directly to your left. That's the worst thing ever. So that's kind of like a basic introduction to table selection and different types of players and how to exploit them and stuff. I want to save that for day 10. We'll talk more about that. But in general, keep those general rules of thumbs that I just mentioned. And just kind of shift gears here. There's a lot of conversation on the internet about whether you should start tables or not. People have different opinions, different preferences. I say if you're pretty confident in your post-flop play, you should start tables. Now, if there's tables already going and there's seats open, there's no point unless you really like playing shorthanded, like super shorthanded. Um, but let's say that the tables are bad, or you just want to start more tables or whatever. Just go ahead and start up a table, and fish will start playing against you. People might get a little intimidated and think, well, what if a reg sits down with me or whatever? That's probably not going to happen. And the reason is because regs are there to make money. And if you're sitting there by yourself and they see you as a reg, they're not going to sit down with you to play heads up against regs. Not that often. There's some people that have like egos and stuff like that, or some people might, have a read on you and try to exploit you by playing heads up with you or something. But in general, regs aren't going to sit with you. You're basically just going to be sitting there for a little bit, and then a fish is just going to show up, and it's the most magical thing in the world. You'll be sitting heads up with a fish for a couple of minutes, and just like all of his money is yours. You just basically have to hit a hand, or just get the showdown value bet him or whatever. But all of his money is belonging to you. There's no one else at the table, and that's the best thing ever. Um, but yeah, I would say give that a try if you haven't already. It's definitely a great alternative to just sitting there and waiting for tables. Instead of just sitting there waiting on the wait list, you can just pop up some tables and the fish will come to you and regs will avoid you. So give it a try. It's very good. So I guess all in all, just remember that different little stats are generally useless. They're not 100% useless. Like for instance, if you're a huge rake back grinder on PokerStars or something, you're gonna want to see like how many hands per hour you're gonna get. That might be a little bit useful because if you're trying to maintain a certain hourly or let's say there's contributed rake, you might want to see what the how many like players per flop or something like that. Um, or that might make some minor decisions on the tables that you might want to make or you might want to sit at. But ultimately, if you're just there to make money, it doesn't matter what the table's aggregate conditions are. Like if everyone here is a giant nit, but I have the biggest whale ever to my right, like that's a perfect table for me. But the stats are gonna look really messed up. So yeah, basically ignore the stats and don't be lazy. Mark everyone you play with as a certain type of player. Give them color codes, whatever it is for you to know who's who, and then just go by those guidelines that I gave you. Start sitting to the right of fishier players and looser players, and sit to the left of those players. Sit to the right of nits, and generally avoid regs and loose aggressive players because they suck. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We're gonna start diving into some more meatier poker content in the next few days. So stay tuned for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this discussion, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.